Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. There is a very strong argument to be made that Dabo Swinney, the Clemson Tigers, have been one of the bigger winners this offseason than any other program across the country. Now, I think there's a lot of people listening to me say that and saying, well, how could you possibly argue that? Clemson's brought in two transfer portal additions. There's a lot of programs across the country that have brought in 15 plus. It starts with player retention. Player retention is something that it's not fun to talk about. It's not a flashy conversation to have when so many programs are bringing in new players into their roster, but it's becoming one of the most important aspects about building a championship caliber program. And I don't think there's a team across the country that's retained their roster better than Clemson, really in two different ways. One, keeping your players outside of the transfer portal, guys like TJ Parker, guys like Peter Woods, guys like Sammy Brown. I am sure there are plenty of programs that have made back channel offers to some of those guys to hit the portal. But I think it also has to do with keeping your guys out of the NFL draft. And with NIL, it can be a weapon to encourage players to, hey, you could go to the NFL draft. Guys like Cade Klubnik, guys like Antonio Williams, Blake Miller, they're good enough to go to the NFL and play on Sundays next year. But they also have the opportunity to help their draft stock a little bit going into next year, convincing those players to come back for one more year just as meaningful as well. In Clemson, again, it's fun to talk about the newcomer players, the new shiny players that are coming into your program from the transfer portal. You're not going to find better players than some of the players Clemson has retained in the portal. And I think that's where it starts. I think the second conversation you have to have is the continuity around this roster, where I went out of my way and I said, hey, let's go predict what this Clemson depth chart is going to look like in 2025. And you start making that list and say, it's so many guys that have played multiple years together, whether it's on the offensive line, whether it's the quarterback and wide receivers, the team continuity and chemistry is going to be strong for Clemson. It's just not going to be that way for a lot of other programs who are kind of revolving and changing their roster so much from a year-to-year basis. That's what stands out to me about Clemson. And it's kind of this time period where the college football playoffs settle down, the transfer portal kind of comes to a close, and you take a step back and look at the teams that you think can be dangerous in 2025. And I look at Clemson and say, I'm not sure how many teams I like more heading into 2025 than what this Clemson team looks to me on paper. I want to get into what their depth chart might look like, talk about maybe some questions that we still have about this roster. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Clemson fans, it's going to be a busy next couple of weeks, right? Obviously, hiring a new defensive coordinator, which it sounds like is going to happen. The amount of support y'all have shown the fellas over the last couple of weeks has been amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into this one. And I think what I'd love to hear from the Clemson fans is I kind of made some bold predictions, if you will, about some players that I really liked out of high school that I think have the ability and chance to become big-time players for Clemson in 2025. Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on it in the comments section. Let's start at the top. Let's talk about Cade Klubnik. Look, if I were to tell Clemson fans, 5 months ago, before we had the first kickoff, I said going into 2025, there will not be many programs across the country that I have more confidence in terms of quarterback, wide receiver play than Clemson. A lot of people would have called me crazy. That's exactly where we are in the beginning of January. Cade Klubnik, TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco, Antonio Williams. You add Tyler Brown back into the fold. Is there a quarterback wide receiver room that you have more confidence in heading into 2025 than what we just talked about? Because frankly, for me, I can't name you that many. And I think, again, the chemistry and continuity between this unit is going to be huge. You look at Cade Klubnik, it's night and day what we saw from this kid in 2024 versus 2023. In 2023, it was inconsistent. He didn't look like he had that much command of the offense. You look at him in 2024, the command of the offense was night and day different. I mean, he seems so comfortable in the Garrett Riley offense, which makes sense. I mean, he's a year two. It's a year two in the Garrett Riley offense. It's year two for Cade as a starter. You had way better pass catchers around Cade Klubnik than you did in 2023. I think it just kind of keeps going into 2025. You look at some of the areas Cade impressed the most. One, pushing the ball down the field. In 2023, this was a massive problem. They completed 17 passes all year that traveled 20 plus yards down the field. You fast forward to 2024, 35 completions, more than double the amount of completions attacking the deeper third than what you saw in the 2023 season. And Cade got much better throwing the deep ball. He also got much better taking care of the football, 36 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. You're not going to find a quarterback that had a better touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, there was not really an aspect of the football game that Cade Clemson didn't get better at. I think one of the biggest improvements you saw is how to manage his athleticism and know when to use it and how to use it. You know, whether it's, hey, we're going to get outside the pocket, we're going to extend plays, keep our eyes downfield and throw off platform, or we're just going to tuck the football and be dynamic running the football. Back in 2023, when Cade was a sophomore, I don't think he fully understood how to use all that athleticism. We knew he had it, but it didn't necessarily seem like he fully understand how to maximize it. I think you saw a massive step in that direction in 2024. I think another massive help was the wide receiver room. And you look at what this wide receiver room is going to look like in the 2025 year. TJ Moore and Brian Wesco, they're only getting better. Antonio Williams is coming back for one more year. He's kind of he's Cade's guy, clearly. And then you inject Tyler Brown, who was really Cade's guy in 2023. I mean, those are 4 wide receivers that we have a ton of confidence in going into the 2025 season. I think the 2 question marks you have on this offense are, all right, what are we going to do at running back? And what does the tight end position look like? Starting at the running back spot, look, Dabo Swinney has gone to the transfer portal, 2 positions that he wants to address. I look at the running back room and say, I think there's a reason that Dabo Swinney hasn't really looked to add a running back into the room, because I think he has a lot of confidence in David and Gideon Davidson, who's coming in as a true freshman. Look, they're kind of unknown commodities because we didn't see a ton of David as a true freshman. Obviously, Gideon Davidson is going to be a true freshman this year. Those were 2 highly coveted running backs coming out of high school. I think Clemson could be just fine at running back. You obviously have Jay Haynes working back from the injury, and then potentially Adam Randall. Are we going to see Adam Randall stick at running back going into the 2025 year? There's not a known commodity like you had with Phil Maffa last year, but there's a lot of talent in that room. And I certainly could see that room being a very good room for Clemson. Then you look at the offensive line. The thing that stands out to me about this Clemson offensive line is pretty much just running it back with the whole offensive line, which that matters. One, Matt Luke, that's a damn good offensive line coach. And this Clemson offensive line took some strides in the 2024 season very clearly. Giving him another offseason to work with pretty much every single offensive lineman coming back to this roster, I think that's a really big deal, and it's deep. You know, I kind of included some guys in the 2 deep, Colin Sadler, Elijah Thurman. I wonder, Elijah Thurman, to me, coming back from the injury, he seems like a guy that you want to try to find a spot on. I was really impressed with what he was as a true freshman. And what I love about Elijah Thurman and Colin Sadler kind of being the depth pieces on the offensive line, maybe not projected starters, but they're going to play. They're both tackle guard versatile. And so if you have a guy like Tristan that has to miss a game, Colin Sadler can play left tackle. If you have a guy like Blake Miller who has to miss a game, Elijah Thurman can play right tackle, but they also can play a laundry list of spots on the inside of the offensive line too. You got good players coming back. You're getting that continuity coming back. You're also going to be deep. And that's an important conversation. If you're a Clemson team that going into 2025, you make no mistake about it, that's a team that wants to be competing in the month of December and January, talking about college football playoffs. If you want to win ACC championships and make runs in the college football playoffs, you damn well better be deep, especially on the offensive line, because you're going to have to use that depth at some point. Clemson has a lot of continuity coming back, but they also have a lot of depth. No, I think the question is, I mean, it's kind of a stark difference from the conversations we had all last offseason. You know, we feel really good about this offense. It's hard not to see this offense being one of the better units, not only in the ACC, but in the country. I think the question is, how good can this defense be? Now, I think what's exciting about the defense is, look, I think the personnel's there. I think you just got to get a defensive coordinator that can come in and maximize the personnel. You start with the defensive line. We know what we have with TJ Parker. We know what we have with Peter Woods. Stephylin Green was quietly a big storyline for Clemson. That guy, to me, looks like a dude for Clemson in 2025. And that's probably the question mark you have is, the depth on the inside of the defensive line with guys like Capehart going to the NFL, with guys like Trey Williams hitting the transfer portal, maybe there's some questions about how deep this unit will be. Stephylin Green showing that he's, very capable going into next year. That's a big storyline. I think a lot of Clemson fans are still looking at Vic Burley and say, what does Vic Burley look like, getting healthy, going into year 3? To me, the big storyline is Amari Adams as a true freshman. We saw 2 years ago Peter Woods coming as a true freshman and be a guy right away. I know this is big shoes to fill. I think Amari Adams is that good. And so when I look at Amari Adams, I have him listed in the 3 deep right now. That's a guy that to me I look at and say, I trust to be a big-time rotational player on the defensive line. Another guy that I would look at is Darian Mayo. Darian Mayo, we knew wasn't going to be a year 1 guy. He had to fill out that frame. He's really gifted with the physical traits that he has, especially the length. But you kind of knew the physicality needed to take a step before he was ready to play at the college football landscape. What if Darian Mayo is ready to rock and roll in 2025? Off-ball backers, Sammy Brown, Wade Woodaz. I don't think we have any question marks there. Now, where I think it gets kind of interesting is in the secondary. You feel good about the cornerbacks, right? Avian Terrell, I know maybe a tough last couple of weeks of the season, but we know how the sample size of him being good is a heck of a lot bigger than him being not good. So we know we got a guy. Ashton Hampton looks to be a very good football player going into 2025. You feel good about Corey and Gibson. You feel good about Jaden Lucas. Here's my question. Little bit thin at safety, I think is worth pointing out. Does maybe Avian Terrell, a guy that I think would play nickel in the NFL, does Avian Terrell maybe move to the nickel spot and allow you to move Shelton Lewis back to safety and have Shelton Lewis and Khalil Barnes play the 2 high safety look? Just a question. Ricardo Jones, a guy that going into year 2, I think certainly could play, but that, I guess the conversation is how can we maximize and get all the good football players in the secondary on the football field? I think there's an argument that Avian Terrell, it kind of sounds crazy because Avian Terrell, it's hard to find good boundary cornerbacks, and Avian Terrell is a really good boundary cornerback. But if you want to get all your best players on the football field at the same time, you put Avian Terrell to the nickel spot, you move Shelton Lewis back to safety with Khalil Barnes. That to me could make sense. I trust Dabo Swinney and I trust the new defensive coordinator to kind of maximize that. I'm not saying I would argue for it, but I'm saying that could be a potential personnel move that helps you maximize this defense. At the end of the day, this defense is good. I mean, TJ Parker, NFL dude, Peter Woods, NFL dude, Will Hell, NFL dude, Sammy Brown, certainly an NFL dude, Avian Terrell, NFL, Ashton Hampton, NFL. I mean, that's more than half of this defense you look at and say they will be playing on Sundays at some point. This is a defense that can be much better than what they were in the 2024 year. If Dabo crushes this defensive coordinator hire, which I hope it's Tim Banks, it's hard not to see this defense getting back to where we expected to be for Clemson. And if you get that with an offense that just continues to get better and there's no reason to think otherwise, I look at this Clemson team and say not only ACC championship, dangerous in the college football playoffs. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Let it fly in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts, opinions on this depth chart. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.